Hello and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy. My name is Jed, and today we are in the Meno. Hooray! So we've been reviewing a lot about where we're up to because we are at a significant turning point. We've already had a couple of dialectics from Socrates about what virtue is, enough to establish a paradigm for all those who are able to read and who are reading. That's what we've been doing, and I hope you've been doing it too. Because part of reading, we are discovering, is looking for puzzles and questions, and it helps by having a model. If you have a model or paradigm, you can recognize deviations from it. But also, if you have a model or paradigm, you can use it yourself to create your own dialectics, which is, of course, part of reading, part of the practice of philosophy. So, after doing that, establishing a paradigm, throws it over to Meno. Hey, how well can you do? Meno does what most people do. Doesn't change his mind, just quotes a poet he happens to agree with already. And Socrates gives us a demonstration. So while you can think of the first part, maybe, this is our hypothesis, maybe the first part is the definition section, maybe this is the demonstration section, because Socrates demonstrates the dialectic in use. In use in a different way, with another person. So self to other. Socrates to Meno. Now we have established that I'm not sure if Meno is going to pick it up or not, that virtue involves being able to apprehend the whole of being, which the question Socrates gives us is, how can we do that if you do not know self? And he again references the paradigm and throws it over to Meno and says, have another go. So let's see how well Meno does this time. And again, we are reading in a new way. I haven't seen anybody read Meno in this way before ever. And part of that reason is because, we haven't had a good translation of the text until now. That's the theme from Rocky Balboa. So we play that because this is the best translation, and our translator is Juan Balboa from Rocky. So because we have this translation, we can read in this way, which is neat because it's a game, it's an active process, it's fun. But also, you could say, well, another reason we haven't been able to read this way is Pierre Grimes. Pierre Grimes, he often talks about how all he's really done in his life is teach people how to read, which is interesting. So without Pierre Grimes helping us learn how to read, we haven't been able to figure out what that would involve. But also, without philosophical midwifery, which Pierre Grimes introduced, our translator wouldn't have had the ability to remove a lot of his personal interpretations from the text. And without Pierre Grimes's instruction in philosophy, we wouldn't have all of these key terms. So how come we haven't been able to read it up until now? And who can we give the credit to? Well, Juan Balboa, of course, and Pierre Grimes. So that's pretty neat. That's where we are. So, but we are doing something new on this channel, applying that while also learning how to read. So with that in mind, let's see how well Meno does. Let's jump in. All right, we're working, we're away. So here we are in the text. We are asking for the whole of virtue. I've given you the paradigm. You've given me a part of virtue. We want the whole of virtue. So let's start at the beginning. By the way, as we restart, let's hold this question. How the heck can we know the whole of virtue, which involves the whole of being? Whoops. without knowing the self. So we're going to carry that question with us as we read. Socrates, for if you also remember, when I was just now answering you about shape, we rejected that kind of answer that attempts to explain something by using terms that are still to be investigated and have not been agreed upon. There's a certain definitions are important, which is one of the four categories of the dialectic. Just to remind ourselves. The dialectic looks a little like this. And by the way, if you're confused about how we got to this, check out the introduction to the Parmenides, which is where Parmenides gives us what we need to figure out the paradigm of the dialectic. Definition, demonstration, division, conclusion, or synthesis, analysis. So hey, by the way, definitions are needed. You need definitions. And by the way, there's a flow. You have to come up with a definition before you use it. Meno says, yes, and we indeed acted correctly in rejecting using undefined terms. Now then, O noble friend, you must not think that while whatever is the nature of virtue as a whole is still under investigation, that by answering in terms of the parts of virtue, that you will make the nature of self clear to anyone. This is really great that we have this definition because we can get familiar with the significance of self. Our whole life is a quest to know and show the self. If you're not on that quest, you are doing the inverse, becoming identified with your pathologos, the cause of your problems. So the fact that we have self used so often in conversation with so much meaning attached to it really gives us an insight to the kind of thinking that we want to have. You won't make the nature of self clear to anyone. They're talking about being. Self is honorific. But also, it's the particular, so the word self can connect the particulars. So we can read it this way. By answering in terms of parts of virtue, you will not make the nature of it clear to anyone. There's the lower. Now the middle term, the honorific, referring to being. You will not make the nature of self virtue clear to anyone, which is our goal, right? To apprehend it in being. By the way, if virtue is apprehending the whole of being, you can't have the whole of something unless you're operating on a higher cognitive and ontological level of reality, which is the self. So you will not make the nature of the one self clear to anyone. All three are there. So we can operate at any level we want to. Up until now, only the lesser has been translated, but for us, we have the greater and we have the ultimate, so that's neat. So don't think that whatever is the nature of virtue as a whole is still under investigation, don't think that by answering in terms of parts of virtue, you will make the nature of self clear to anyone, or make anything else clear by speaking in the same way. So we're also learning about how to speak. Thus, we must start again from the same question. To explain anything which you mean the being, we must start again from this same question. To explain anything which you mean of the being of virtue and excellence. Again, the word is being, ontos. We can read it there for ourselves. And just for fun, let's jump over and see whether anybody has been able to do philosophy up until now, by seeing if it's included in any of the other translations that people have been trying to work with. so we can see it for ourselves. You don't just have to believe me. 79E. Let's pull it up. Well then, my good sir, you must not in your turn suppose that the nature of virtue as a whole, that while the nature of virtue as a whole is still under inquiry, that you will explain it to anyone by replying in terms of its parts. It. Where's the honorific? Where's the ultimate? Where's philosophy, which is about the honorific? What's the next step after philosophy? Philophronesis, the self. Where's that? Not there. What's that mean? What's the implications of that? Whatever we've been doing up until now hasn't been philosophy. In fact, it might actually be more accurately represented by Meno's way of being, which is ironic, tragic, theatrically tragic, to quote the text. Or, so you won't explain it to anyone, it, by replying in terms of its parts, or by any other statement on the same lines. You will only have to face the same question over again. Now, what is this virtue of which you are speaking all the time? Or do you see no force in what I say? We must start again from the same question to explain anything which you mean of the being of virtue. Or do I appear to you to say nothing? See the difference? The being, we want the being. That's part of his education that he left before he was able to be initiated into. Being, a whole different level of reality, where we get our definitions from. What is virtue of which you are speaking all the time? All the time? Is that the same as being? Well, you could say, well, technically being is eternity, so it's all the time true. But no, it's not the same. You're saying it all the time, not that it exists all the time because it's eternal in being, and therefore the paradigm for truth. Do you see no force in what I say? Even that line. Do I appear to you to say nothing? It's dropping key terms. No force is not the same as appearance. Specifically, appearance refers to this ontological level of reality. The world of appearance is only perceived with our physical perceptions. That's down here. That's the level of belief. So we're learning about how to do the dialectic, and the dialectic specifically uses the words that come up in the conversation. Now, right at the time of recording, there is the 2024 American election, and between Trump and Kamala Harris, and a lot of the propaganda bullshit artists who try and who have been defending Trump, all they can say is pretend his words have no meaning. We are going to hold Kamala Harris to strict account with every single word she says and the way she says it. But Donald Trump, they use a word, bloviates. He's just bloviating. Don't listen to anything he says about being a fascist and bringing in tyranny in World War III. Don't listen to those words. They don't have meaning, which is the height of injustice. You are specifically saying there is no logos. Nothing is true. By the way, we don't even follow a principle because we're not applying that to Kamala, to the other team. So very, very disgusting stuff. And I'm, in one sense, I am very bewildered as to why nobody in authority is addressing this sickness in our society that attacks the logos that will allow tyranny to happen because nothing is anything. But on the other hand, well, we haven't had this text. So, but even without being able to have the text to really get a mastery of the logos, people should recognize the significance of saying words don't matter, except when he says this racist stuff to appeal to other racists and fascists. It matters to them, but to nobody else. You know, he didn't really mean that when he said what he said. Crazy stuff. Okay, but the exact opposite of that is true. Those people are disgusting, and really we need to address the causes of why that happens and why that's allowed to happen. Okay, so what we are doing is the exact opposite. The words mean everything. The words are literally the logos that you climb towards your destiny. It's what we use for understanding. It also tells us what we need to discover about our beliefs. It's all about words. That's our thing. It's the logos. So while Socrates is using words artfully, specifically, beneficially to help Meno develop, to help him remove his false beliefs and develop true understanding that can lead to that experience of being nous and even beyond it to phronesis or the self, the words Meno uses are important because it tells us about the beliefs he has. Just like when you go to a doctor and the doctor says, what have you been doing all week? If your patient says, oh, you know, I had 10 beers yesterday and I had 10 vodkas the day before, those words mean something. He's telling you about his problem. He's telling you he's an alcoholic. You have to listen for those. It's essential to being a good doctor. Same thing for us, but the doctor of the soul. So the words that are being used by Meno that Socrates also picks up and uses, so he's doing his best to follow the logos of Meno, includes appearances. Appearances is the realm of belief. Belief is the realm of the physical world, where you can't have understanding. You can't point to something and say, that's virtue. That doesn't make sense. Even if you're pointing to a quote you like or a religious text you like, doesn't make any sense. That's not a definition. So, not only are we not having the realm of being in our past translations, the key word appearance has been removed. For some reason, all of the past translators are like, nah, that word's not important. I can change it with, is there no force in what I say? What? You are not the artful master of the logos. You don't have the medical art of logos. Why do you think you can change his words, translator? Good question. That's why we have the Greek. So, again, not only has philosophy been limited from our accessibility because of these rubbish translations, and they're rubbish. Some people try to save it by, oh, but it's nicer to read. It's still garbage. It's nice to read garbage. Not only that, but we lack what we need to understand, not just the arguments, not just how to reach being, but also the other level. We don't just want to reach being, we want to take that understanding and experience of the ideal, of being, of virtue, and use it artfully. How do we use it? How do we do the dialectic to benefit? So these are all important things for us to acknowledge so we know what we're doing, the stakes of what we're doing, the significance of what we're doing, and the significance of how rare it is and that we can only start to reawaken it now. Do I appear to you to say nothing? So let's highlight that because of how important it is. So we're after the nature of self. appearance. We are also after the being of excellence or virtue. So those are the levels we're on. So you could say there are 3 levels. How do you artfully recognize the particular words? Appearance on the lowest level, Meno's level. How do we reach a definition of the being of virtue? That's the Socrates level. And how do we also reach the level above Socrates, which is what Socrates is telling us to do, the self? Meno says, again, you indeed appear to me to have spoken correctly. See the significance? Meno doesn't have the capacity to say you have spoken correctly. He doesn't have the paradigm of truth to say, yeah, that's true. All he can point to is appearances. Telling us where he's at, telling us he has the alcoholism of the soul, telling us he's at the physical world of being. Becoming. Everything is becoming and change in the physical world. Now then, answer again from the start. What do you and your companion claim virtue to be? Who's his companion? Does he mean his teacher or his partner? His boyfriend or whatever? Let's see what the other text. The one that I've just been saying is rubbish. Let's see if it helps us out though. Helpful rubbish. I think what you say is right. Is he thinking or is he talking about appearances? Not in the text. What do you and your associates say that virtue is? Associate? Doesn't help us. Maybe it will become clear as we continue to read. Is he talking about his teacher? Is he talking about his boyf? Oh, Socrates, says Meno, even before I met you, I heard that yourself was nothing other than puzzled. Oh, what did he hear? The self of Socrates is puzzled. And that you also make others puzzled. Ooh, sounds like a good podcast. Wink, wink. And now, as you appear to me, you are also, woof, here we go, bewitching and drugging, and completely enchanting me. Woof. So these seem like keywords. Maybe we should look them up. But let's keep reading first. Bewitching, drugging, enchanting, what do they mean? So that I have become filled full of perplexity. Have you though, Meno? And if I'm allowed to make a joke, now often we know that people often hide behind their humor. Say something racist, hey bro, it was just a joke. Hey, what's up? Diggs, welcome to the chat. We're reading Plato's Meno to discover what is virtue. How do we talk about it? How do we reach it? What is it in itself in the realm of being, the eternal nature of virtue? And how do we also apprehend the whole of the world of being by knowing our true self? So many levels. But also, how do we also function with the dialectic to reason with people who have false ideas about virtue? Like Meno's, he started by thinking that excellence is doing bad things to people you don't like and doing good things to people you do like. Very typical idea of what virtue is, but of course, garbage. So that's what we're reading about. How do we learn virtue ourselves, and how do we benefit others by passing that on. So Meno says, can I make a joke? You seem to me in your appearance and in every other way to be so much like the flat stingray of the sea. He's calling him a flathead. Ooh. Throwing out some insults. Now that's interesting as well, because we're learning how to follow the logos. Follow the understandable pattern of words and reason that unfolds to us at every moment, and we have to do our best to participate in it. The logos unfolds the dimensions of reality, like these. So these are cognitive functions, but we could also, next to it, talk about their objects. So their objects would be over here. Let's move this over. So how we think is, fancy word, epistemology, but their objects is ontology, which means what is, from the word ontos, or being. So we can say the physical world, we can say the metaphysical world or reality, and then we can say the self, sometimes called the one self. And we can call the physical world the world of becoming, because everything is in a state of becoming. It's growing or decaying. Reality is in being, so we want to define virtue. So you can't point to physical examples. Virtue is when that guy punched that guy in the face. Virtue was when John Diehard shot all those bad guys. These are examples in the realm of becoming. We want the whole of it, which is something in being, which is true eternally for everyone. So no need to debate about personal opinions. So beliefs and opinions, that corresponds to the physical world. But also, how can you apprehend the whole of being unless you are at a higher ontological level? You could say that is the self, or the ultimate, or the first and final cause, or our destiny. Lots of words to talk about it. So we can also do this. And our job also is to match up what cognitive function, when you're like Meno is talking about appearances, he's in here. When Socrates says it's tragic that your education didn't initiate you into what? This. And Socrates is asking us, hey, Meno might not get here, but you guys, if you recognize that we want to grasp the whole of being, us readers, 2,500 years later, your job is to reach this one. So, anybody who has followed the logos, which is the paradigm that allows the unfolding, you can say one is, let's move this over a little bit. In one direction, like that band. One direction is an unfolding. In the other direction, it's a reverting. That's our job, reverting. As human beings, we incarnate into the physical world, where we use our senses. So we apprehend through our senses. We experience reality through seer. So that's the sixth sense we have that allows us to experience itself, or mind minding mind. Ousia. The faculty that we have to perceive being itself is called ousia. Just like our 5 physical senses allow us to apprehend the physical world, the world of appearances, the world of beliefs. And one of the reasons why we are so immature is we haven't moved beyond it. So everything is a debate. Opinions versus opinions. Whose opinions are right? And we've talked a lot about that. It doesn't go anywhere. So we want to instead follow the logos. So we have a question. One of the questions we have is, if ousia is the sense that allows us to perceive directly the realm of being, where truth exists, where definitions exist, where the paradigm exists, and our senses allow us to experience the physical world of becoming, what then is the way that we apprehend ourself? That's one of the questions we have. Another question we have is, we have some similar questions. We got a lot of questions, but we should be taking better notes of our questions. So one of them is, what's the sense of know? How do we know the self? How do we know the self? So that's that question here. And this is what we're doing in philosophy, the reverting. We're reverting or returning. This is sometimes called anagogic, upward moving. So you might know when you follow the, all of this is the logos, by the way. We said it's words, but it's also the paradigm. It's also the unfolding. It's also what we follow to revert. It's also what we use to extend art and mastership. We use the logos to teach, to guide. We use the logos to rise to greater levels of wholes. We use the logos to rise to greater cognitive functions. So this is all the logos. But you might recognize that when you start following the logos with someone who is stuck at the level of beliefs, which also has a state of mind, we talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect. People who are too stupid to know that they need to reflect on themselves. You aren't born knowing everything. Even if your dad is super awesome and your mum is the best mum ever, doesn't mean they are enlightened. They still have false beliefs that are their problems that they pass on. That's why everyone needs to do philosophical midwifery. Nevertheless, if you're talking with a friend and you are trying to engage in understanding by a reasoned, reflective conversation, then you might go so far, and then once the reasoning, the logos, not your opinion, truth that you are sharing in by following the logos, once you hit a stage where it challenges their beloved beliefs, they hit a block. We call that the pathologos, the sick logos, the block to the logos. And now, how do you recognize when you've hit your block? Well, first of all, primarily it's a block to the logos. So anything that you engage in that can block the logos, it can be tangents. A favorite technique of right-wing propagandist, paid by Russia apparently. So a lot of these propagandists who grift online with fascist, racist beliefs that support the right wing or the Conservative Party, they have been found out to be getting paid by Russia. A lot of money from Russian agents, because they know that this keeps people stuck in ignorance and less likely to change the system of corruption. So one of their techniques is something called the Gish Gallop, which is talking really, really, really fast, saying a million points really, really fast so that no one has time to challenge all of them. Say one wrong point and then another wrong point and then another wrong point, another wrong point, and therefore Trump is the best. therefore we should support Russia. So that's one way you can block the logos. But the most common is something called ad hominem. To ignore the logos. Another technique is tangent, by the way. Oh, well, you're asking me this question, but what about that question? Sometimes we call that whataboutisms. You're saying my team is bad, but what about your team? That's a tangent. That's avoiding the question. A tangent. You're asking me a question about virtue. Yeah, but what about the Dodgers in the World Series? What about the White Sox? It's a tangent. It will effectively stop the logos. But the most common one you might have recognized is something called ad hominem. So we can write that on the board. So all of this is and all of this is something called following the logos. Whether you are at the level of self unfolding reality and the physical world, whether you are us human beings who have evolved to the stage where we can reflect on ourselves, ousia, with the logos, that allows for our reverting, following the logos to reach our discovery of the self and our destiny. Whether you are rising to the greater levels of wholes or greater cognitive functions, that's following the logos. You apply your understanding of the logos to address your false beliefs, as Socrates might be doing with Meno. You use your logos, your understanding, to understand the realm of being. That opens you up for the direct experience of being, to confirm your understanding in direct experience. That's nous. You put those two together, you reflect even on that experience with your logos, then that maybe opens the door for this, phronesis, which might be tied to the self. You use the logos to teach people, to guide people, true mastership. One of the problems that people get attached to the beliefs that they have is it allows them to cosplay being a master, being a guru, being a teacher, being a guide, because they can just imitate how their dad yelled at them, because that's my belief and appearance. So we can put appearance in here too. Beliefs. Let's go back to blue. That was my appearance of what it means to be knowing. So it's much easier just to yell like dad yelled at me than it is to master the art of the logos like Socrates. So that's why. That's the Dunning-Kruger effect. The dumber you are, the more attached to your appearance of knowledge you are, because you have less access to actually following the logos. Now, that's not necessarily everyone's fault. Personally, it's the system. The poorer you are, the more religious beliefs are part of your culture, the more likely you are to vote for Trump. Even though he's the exact opposite of all of your beliefs, apparently. Because this is in opposition to this. And we talk about that often. If you're an apprentice mechanic and you say to your master, hey, why does the gasket fit on there? And he says, just believe me. That's a con artist. You're not learning. You have to be able to think for yourself. Otherwise, how will you be able to discern a grifter? And very relevant because that Donald Trump guy is running right now as we speak, as it's being recorded. Okay, let's hope. I don't know. It's really a demonstration of pathologos over logos. By the way, it would be better if the Logos party was actually following the logos. But they do terrible things as well, like support capitalism, support genocide, and so on. Not as bad, of course, as the strict fascist party. But anyway, so all of this is following the logos. Back to what we're doing. Follow the logos. So you might recognize that as we follow the logos, which involves self-reflection. This involves self-reflection or ousia, using the dialectic as best we can, reason, words, and other things that we are discovering. As we do that, let's move it over a bit. There'll be a point, so as we follow that path up, or that ladder up, follow that path up, you will reach a point where your friend hits a block to the logos, which can be a pathologos, possibly a pathologos, which is a certain class of false belief that is the cause of our our greatest problems. Now, there are many ways in which that manifests. Tangents, distractions, gish gallop. So instead of asking questions together, you say a whole bunch of false crap really fast, like Ben Shapiro or Tim Pool or whatever. Wearing down the good faith of the argument. But the biggest one is something called ad hominem. Ad hominem. And there are a lot of variations of this ad hominem, which is to attack the person instead of focusing on the logos. So you're having a conversation with your friend, you're following the logos, all of a sudden he starts to realize, oh, he might be wrong. I don't like being wrong. I like to pretend to be the knower. That's why I like my dumb religion. It makes me, I can cosplay as being wise like Jesus or like Muhammad or like whoever the heck. So what will they do? They will, you might have realized this, they will block the logos by starting to attack you personally. I don't like your tone. I think you're being patronizing. I think that you are weird looking. If my friends were here, we would beat you up because you stink. That's not the logos. But it's important to recognize because we are human beings. Human beings necessarily get a block to the logos. A pathologos specifically. Because the dialectic we are here to master has two sides. We always say it, worth saying. It's worth saying many times, to quote Socrates. We have to climb that upward ladder of the logos while also address the pathologos, its shadow. Because both use the dialectic, but the dialectic has two. The dialectic is if the thing exists and if it doesn't. There are 4 categories, so there are 8 in total. If virtue is, what can you say about it? How does it function? How does it divide up? what conclusion you can come to, and if virtue doesn't exist in being, it's just an opinion, what can you say about it? So, if we are here to master the dialectic, we have to address this for the highest term. What's the highest term? The self. That's why Socrates says, how can you know the whole of virtue or the whole of being without knowing the self? Meaning we have to do this on the self. That's what Meno, be over Meno's head, but we can do it. But also, as we do that, you will hit blocks. You will hit blocks. You will hit blocks. You will have states of mind that say, this is dumb, watch something else, do something else. You will start, maybe you'll attack the channel. I've already gotten comments. Your material, yeah, I like your podcast, but too many colors or too few colors, or I don't like your thumbnails, that kind of crap. That's all ad hominem. Not comments about the material from these people, because you will hit blocks. You have to be in the philosophical midwifery book to address them. Take notes of your state of mind, your feelings that make it difficult to follow the logos, and the thoughts that come up, the words, states of mind and logos, always the two. Nous and dianoia, vision and understanding, states of mind and words, those two. Because that's what you apply the dialectic on to solve what isn't true about yourself. So if we are here to master the dialectic and it has two parts, we necessarily have forgotten the truth about the self, which is why we read the Meno, and we have a block to the logos based on our false idea of the self. That's the pathologos, and you will therefore hit a block. So if you don't want to go down this road, you can take the good path, the more virtuous path. So virtuous? Is this virtuous? Virtuous. Which is to recognize and acknowledge. Zoom in a bit. Recognize and acknowledge block. No, I'm never wrong. Garbage. Don't be immature. Take notes. Write it down, just like a grocery list. You ever notice that when you go to the grocery store, you can't remember everything? Then you might realize, oh, if I notice I'm out of, I don't know, dishwasher liquid, if I put a note on the fridge, on a whiteboard somewhere, I just take a photo of that whiteboard before I go shopping. And all of a sudden, I remember my dishwashing. What's mine say? Dishwashing liquid, cellophane. I need some Velcro for my guitar pedal. All of these things I probably wouldn't remember when I'm walking down the shopping aisle. Same for this, but this is far more important for your soul. Take notes. Have a notebook or your favorite note-taking app. Maybe try Obsidian. That's a fun one to get into. Take notes of states of mind. What feeling states of mind or feelings come up. Oh, I really feel like this guy's a big fat smelly jerk, telling me that we can understand problems, telling me that I can transcend my beliefs. Oh, I really want to punch him in the face. That's a feeling. And also words. Oh, the word would be punch him in the face. The feeling is words, thoughts. Notice the two ladders of our ladder. It's the two rails of our ladder of the logos. States of mind and understanding. Nous and dianoia. take notes. See when, let's use a different color. You also better recognize when they come in, because there's a reason why it came in when it did. So see when, note when the block surfaced. What were you doing immediately before? Because it had to block something, right? Promise, different color. What color? Promise to use these notes in philosophical midwifery when time is appropriate. Which again is the dialectic on what's false, which is the dialectic, same art that Socrates is giving us the paradigm of, dialectic on what is not true of self. And then get back to your work. Get back to work. Get back to work, son. Then get back to the logos of the conversation. Notice, Socrates is doing everything he can to keep the conversation alive. Even when Meno says, haha, you don't know what virtue is, I'm going to tell everyone. Socrates is like, yeah, I don't care. Tell everyone. By the way, also tell them I haven't met anyone who does know virtue. Even your teacher. But let's talk about it. He's given several dialectics on the definition of virtue. Goes over Meno's head. He stays in the conversation. Okay, I've given you the... Now, I've also shown you how to give a definition. Now you have a go. And Meno didn't even get anywhere close to using the dialectic, the paradigm that was established. What does Socrates do? Keeps the conversation alive. This is a very easy one. Because what does a block to the logos do? It blocks the logos. What's another way of saying that? It ends the conversation, the logos-based relationship. This is not about being right. We've already seen that. Aporia, being at a loss, is still as virtuous as having the right answer, so long as the way you are pursuing truth is virtuous. So long as you're doing your best to keep the conversation alive, do understanding, not insist on your personal beliefs, not block the logos, and keep the conversation alive, then you're acting justly. Says Socrates. Says the truth about the logos of the conversation. So, what does a block do? Tangents, distractions, gish gallop, ad hominem, various ways of attacking the person instead of focusing on the logos. Indefensible arguments. Well, I don't like your tone. What the hell does that mean? So therefore, I can ignore your content. I don't know. What do you want to speak? Want me to speak in a Mickey Mouse voice? Is that the tone you like? Or are you just making demands, impossible demands, as an excuse to ignore the logos? You are being unjust. Now the opposite, recognize and acknowledge the block, takes integrity, take notes, it's like a shopping list, of what? The states of mind and feelings that come up and the words and thought. Both are clues. Both are clues and terms, as well as terms needed for our midwifery, our dialectic on what's false. Note when the block surfaced. Hey, it's telling you the ceiling you're at. I can follow the logos up until here, but no further. So that can be either states of mind or words. I can follow understanding until here. Then I start to get itchy. Then I start to get tired. Then I start to get mad. Whatever. But not just that, states of mind too. I can have happy states of mind. I can even have insightful states of mind. Hey, my block hasn't come up yet. I can have profound states of mind. Oh, when I'm on the cusp of the state of mind that goes beyond the level of becoming to pure ousia, I've been following the logos with such precision and such focus and wonder and open-mindedness that I feel myself separating completely from those physical senses of the physical world. I might be entering the realm of being. That's when my block comes up for some people. Very common for those people who do yoga or meditation, because their goal is specifically to separate from their physical senses. That's what yoga means. Yoga is a method of joining with the realm of being. That's where the root comes from. So that could be when your block comes up. And as we've read in the Philosophical Midwifery book, that's something that Pierre Grimes did when he was young. One of the earliest Westerners to study Zen Buddhism, along with his good friend Alan Watts. And the difference between him and Alan Watts, well, one of the many differences, is when he was sitting in these ashrams doing meditation, normally people just hit their patha logos and that's it. Hopefully they build up enough ki or inner energy by sitting and breathing for 50 years and they'll push through it. But you don't have to push through it if you're doing midwifery. So Pierre Grimes would walk around the block, like you'd sit for 2 hours, then you stretch your legs by walking around the block. And he would say, hey, what are your blocks like? And he was naturally inclined, before he systematized it as philosophical midwifery, he was naturally curious about the logos and the false logos, that he asked them questions the same way Socrates is doing, but about their blocks, not about the truth of virtue. So Socrates was doing it about the truth, Pierre was doing it about what's false. That allowed them to unblock themselves and have enlightenment states. So why are we talking about that right now? Because this can come up when you are blocked either from the reasoning or your state of mind. I can be sad but not happy. Not in my house. Like, what's the English expression? You're having a laugh. You need a stiff upper lip. That's a cultural false belief that can be tied to your own personal pathologos block, that you're allowed certain states of mind of, there's the stereotype, the whinging pom. It's an old one. I haven't really heard it. I've just seen it in joke books. Australians making fun of English people because they're allowed to be in a state of mind of complaining, but if you're having fun, you are having a laugh, which is negative. So that can be the state of mind that you're blocked from. Or maybe you're allowed to be having fun, but not blissful, or not in love, or not profound spiritual states of mind. So take notes of the states of mind or the feeling states and the words and thoughts. When it came up, these are also clues. So you can add this. Those are clues and these are clues. All are clues. Promise to address them in philosophical midwifery when the time is appropriate. So today we're doing the Meno, tomorrow we're doing midwifery. Now, it might be appropriate at that time if you're talking with a really good friend who's also in this game, and you're like, gee, I really want to see what I can see about my block right now, then you can take a pause from the logos to do midwifery, so long as you promise to go back to the logos. You're not just using midwifery as a distraction, which happens. The pathologos is very, very clever and insidious. So even as you're learning this, the pathologos can use midwifery as a distraction. Or let's stop talking about the nature of understanding virtue, or the nature of virtue as a whole and how we understand it. Let's do some midwifery, please. Which could be all right, so long as you promise to go back to it, you're not using it as a tangent. Equally so, I've seen many times, people who are familiar with the pathologos will use pathologos as a kind of ad hominem attack. You're following the logos very nicely, they hit their block, and instead of saying, maybe they might start by saying, I don't like your tone, or I feel you're being patronizing, or I feel your intentions are blah, 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 blah. These are all nonsense opinions that can't be proven or disproven, so they can work. Of course, if they have any integrity, they will reflect on the nature of those attacks, and they will see that they are undisprovable, so they are a kind of false belief and therefore shouldn't be followed. But the game is, I don't care. I'm going to prove them right by believing in them really hard. Look how angry I am when I tell you that you're wrong. Look at how angry I am when I tell you you're being patronizing, and so on and so on. But that doesn't mean anything. Just because you're angry doesn't make it true. That's a pathologos. That's an image of what it means to be knowing. So one of the kinds of ad hominem attacks can be, you're in a pathologos. So even an understanding of the logos and pathologos can be used by the pathologos to stop the logos. I don't have to listen to you because you're in a pathologos. That's not a principle. Everyone has a pathologos. So what? So we're never going to do philosophy? Bollocks. If you think that someone's in a pathologos, go back to the logos, that's a block to the logos, go back to the logos and see, where did we hit the block? And it's not a pathologos if you, having been pointed out, that's where we left it. Oh no, I can go back to it. Then you're wrong. You weren't in a pathologos. You just hit a block. Or maybe this person was hitting the block, the person being the accuser. So this is very familiar. And as the more we do dialectic, the more you'll realize everyone hits that. I have not met a person who doesn't hit that. And I've known Pierre Grimes for 20 years. Just as Socrates says, hey, I've never met someone who understands the true nature of virtue, and I've met your teacher Gorgias. So it's not that we don't have a block to the logos, we need one, otherwise how will we learn the dialectic on what's false and true? The difference is, do you practice virtue when it's most needed? Because this is when you most need courage. This is when you most need temperance. This is when you most need wisdom. This is when you most need holiness. This is when you most need justice. And all of those things mentioned are in the text as the parts of excellence and virtue. So this is when you most need, as a whole, virtue. Not when it's easy to follow the logos. You don't need anything. You just have fun. Just tune into this podcast and have fun with your mate Jed. It's when you don't like Jed's face or whatever. It's when you don't like the cut of Socrates' jib. I'm not reading this because the way that Socrates' jib is cut, don't like it. What's a jib? Shut up. This is not about reason. It's about an excuse to stop reason. You must be able to define a jib. We just read that you have to define terms that you use, right? Where do we see this? Here we go. We reject a kind of answer that attempts to explain something by using terms that are still to be investigated and have not been defined or agreed upon, defined together. So you say, hey, I don't want to do philosophy because of the cut of Socrates' jib. I don't like the cut of his jib. He said, well, you can't do that. That's not the logos. You're at a block from the logos. Have some integrity. Reflect on it. Define what a jib is. And they will say, a jib is shut your mouth. That's not an agreed upon definition. You can't say a jib is a shut your mouth. So what do you do instead? This. So when you have a block to the logo specifically, notice when Meno's been blocked several times already, what does Socrates say? Hey, let's go back to the start. Let's try again. Let's try it a different way. Let's try and use the paradigm. Just give me your definition and I'll work with it. Always, Socrates is keeping the logos alive, keeping the relationship alive, keeping the conversation alive. That's what it means to be human. If you knew it all already, you wouldn't be here. You wouldn't need a path of logos. You wouldn't need to forget the logos and forget the self. So you can master this art. It's not about being right. We've already seen that. Aporia is still virtue. It's about keeping the relationship alive, a good kind of relationship, which is this. So, recognize and acknowledge the block. Take the notes of the states of mind and feelings and the thoughts and words that come up that say, I don't like his jib and his feeling. You might feel tired or frustrated or itchy. They are all clues. When did it come up? I was going along nicely until he started talking about God, or he started talking about being, or he started talking about the self. I was okay with the idea that the divine or being or God was understandable. But when he started saying there's something greater even than being, which means there's something greater than self, all of a sudden I said, no, that's heresy, and yeah, no, whatever. So everyone's going to be different level depending on how long you've been in this relationship, how much you've been practicing it. So promise to use those notes when it's appropriate, and then return back to the conversation. Or if it's appropriate now, do some midwifery with a promise to go back to the conversation. Don't use it as itself a tangent. So this is when you most need to practice virtue. Not when it's easy, when you're at your block. And this is for everyone. Everyone. Even Pierre Grimes. It's not that we don't have a block, it's what we do with the block. How well are you loving the logos? Philologos might be better even than philosophy. Right? So, recognizing that, you can recognize, oh, yeah, when I talk to my Christian friend or whatever, we have these wonderful conversations, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, he just changes his state of mind all of a sudden. He starts jumping up and down. He starts speaking in this authoritative voice. He starts sounding like his dad, or he starts sounding like that priest that we used to go to at school. Yeah, that's his block. And he starts doing this, ad hominem, or tangents, or threats. Lots of different ways. So what? So, we will become more familiar with that the more we practice this, because we're in a human world. You will face that from humans, even the best of them. Which is why any relationship has to have 3 members. You, your friend, or lover, or partner, or whoever, and the logos. Have to. Every relationship is a ménage à trois. Funny, weird to say it that way. Otherwise, you will just try and force your own personal beliefs about what is right and good and just and whatever. That's going to be a path of logos. That's just going to end in disaster. You have to be working towards the logos at all times. Which is great because you have a shared focus. You can both share your insights about the logos, share your experiences about the logos, share your understanding about the logos continually as a relationship forever. So we have Meno doing the opposite. What we can recognize is as an ad hominem already. Your appearance. What's that? Ad hominem. And every other way. And throw every other ad hominem into the conversation. You are a flathead stingray. So flat stingray of the sea. So let's see what the other translation calls the flat stingray a flat torpedo sea fish. Okay. All right, a bit different. So let's just for fun, let's see what the actual translation is. Is it a flat stingray or a flat torpedo sea fish? And that's what we can do because we have the internet, we can read for ourselves. So let's jump in. Dun, 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 dun. It's a bit bright. Let's turn the brightness down a little bit. Oh, it's the same for you. Paste it in here. Copy that. Paste it in Google. He always tells me that he's got these new things available. I've heard it a million times. Woof. Isn't that fast, lady? Omitotalos de platinaki. Okay. That's a lot of words in there. So let's take the first one. Oh, like. Okay. All right, homeo. Right. So there's a likeness here. So you're like, that first word is like. Let's just make sure. Yeah, you're resembling or you're like. Okay, so that's like. So we want the other two words. We want platine. Where's it? Let's get rid of this one. We want Platinaki. So he's calling Platinaki. This is fun because now you know how to pronounce it. When you ever hit your pathologos block or just a anti-logos block, doesn't have to be a pathologos block. Pathologos is a certain class of block to logos. But whenever you are struggling in a conversation, you can insult your friend by saying, "You're a Platinaki. You're a Platinaki." Because that's the insult that was given to Socrates. Platinaki, you're making me confused. You are Platinaki. Let's see what that means. Platinaki. Platie means square. Ah, this is the flat-headedness. The square head. Square. All right. Calling him a blockhead is what he's calling him. Platie. Town square. All right. So I think he might be calling him a blockhead. Let's see in the lexicon. Okay, nothing there. Why is it just... okay. Okay. Let's try this one. Tablet. You are a tablet head. Tablet again. I think block might be... Slap with a flat hand. Ah, flat. Okay. Right. Okay. So flat or blockhead. Flathead or blockhead. Could be either. Flat. Broad-shouldered. Yeah, flat of the hand. Okay, so there's flat. He's either calling him a flathead or a blockhead. Either way, it's not great. You wouldn't want to call Socrates that if you're foot. Imagine being one of the handful of fortunate human beings to have met Socrates. Someone who himself says, yeah, I'm a gift to humanity on a kind of a tour of duty sent by the gods. This is what he said in his his defense and his trial. I'm here to spread the logos and tell people that you have a guide called a daemon helping you follow the logos. I know what reincarnation is like. I've seen it many times. I know where I'm going. So that I can give everybody an instruction of what's likely to happen if they die and what they need to do to die well. Master the art of the logos, do the dialectic, master it. Learn it and define it and demonstrate it. Education and nurture. Not only will it free you from your problems, the chains you face in the physical world, it will free you from the prison of reincarnation and open you up to meet me where I'm going. If you're a true philosopher, race to meet me where I'm going. I'm going to meet men who've completed their work, mastering the dialectic, the art of the logos, and other daemons and guides who are, daemons and gods who are guides and fellow adventurers, fellow travelers.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
So outside of physical reincarnation, there's still a greater adventure to go on. But the qualification, the tickets into the club, is doing this. And of course it is. Imagine being in such a profound level of reality where things are almost immediate or immediate, and somebody's way of expressing their opinions is like Meno. Agree with me or I'm going to call you a blockhead or a flathead. That would suck. You wouldn't want to take them on an extreme spiritual journey. You want someone who knows how to reason well, knows how to recognize blocks of the logos, knows how to deal with them virtuously, knows how to get back on track. Of course you would. In this life, that's the kind of friends that we're looking for on this channel, and the kind of, always relationships we want, always, necessarily. Even more so when you escape the need for physical incarnation to learn it in this way. So it's obvious once you see it. But again, don't just believe me or don't just believe Socrates. He literally said that in the Phaedo. Do it. All of these terms we pull out in our reading, do a dialectic on it, practice it, find friends you can have coffee with. I said coffee. We have a drink of coffee. It's a little bit of fun that we have. Meet friends to have coffee with and practice your dialectic. Or hopefully they're reading too and they can practice it with you. You can literally start by following the literal arguments we're reading here in the Meno and see if you can practice virtue when you need it. When you get blocked in a safe, friendly environment with your friend, when you hit a block, are you able to do those things? Take the notes. Because you are literally mining gold. It'll free you from your problems, midwifery, but you need the terms. That's why we say every relationship needs to have 3 members. You, your friend, or your beloved, and the logos. So, isn't that neat to find out that we live in an understandable, caring universe that's constantly sharing with us what we need to master the art of the logos? And you don't have to believe anyone, you can actually understand it. It's literally understanding itself. And you can confirm your understanding in ousia, in nous. What was the word ousia again? Isn't that neat to find out? Ousia is the way we apprehend the realm of being. It's the sense. Like we use our physical senses, so we should say, over here we should say, physical senses. Where's my pencil? Isn't that neat to find out? You don't even have to believe Socrates. You can develop your own mastery of the logos through dianoia or understanding that is provable, has a payoff in the experience of virtue itself, of beauty itself, sometimes experienced as bliss. Isn't that neat? There's a reason for your reincarnation. That's the significance of philosophy and awakening philosophy, which is the name of channel. All right. It's always fun when we say the name of the channel. Just like that movie when what was his name? Anthony Interstellar says, "It's time we go Interstellar," and then the whole audience in the cinema goes, because the name of the film is Interstellar. So why we need to awaken philosophy. So flat or block is the first word. Flat, level, broad-shouldered, broad. And the other word is naki, which I'm guessing sounds like a fish, but supposedly is a kind of stingray. Naki. The Anunnaki. What's the Anunnaki? I can't remember. But it sounds like it's a thing. Blatianaki. Blatianaki like the Anunnaki. Now I'm going to find what the Anunnaki is. Anunnaki. That's not how you pronounce it. Anunnaki. Here we go. The Anunnaki are a group of deities of ancient Sumerians. That's not what I thought. I thought it was a Star Wars thing. What's the meaning of Anunnaki? Gods of ancient Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia. That's a funny sounding name. I want to live in Mesopotamia. Well, the Anunnaki were ancient gods of Mesopotamia. Oh, they're aliens. Yeah. Also, aren't they aliens or something? All right, so the ancient gods, or maybe, yeah, alien DNA, Sumerian gods. Okay, so they're either ancient gods or aliens or both. The Anunnaki. But we are Platianaki, flat or box Naki. And Naki means cat? No, that's wrong language. No, it's not cat. Pretty sure it's not cat. So let's look at the... What? No, surely not. Surely not. Let's copy this. Stingray. Oh yeah, it's a stingray. Cool. A flat stingray. Here we go. Blatianaki. Blatianaki. Numbness caused by palsy. Oh. Alright, so electric ray that benumbs one who touches it. So it's a stingray, and it's the name for being numb. So when you're having a great conversation and you're brought to a stunned silence where you're completely at odds, which is great for us because we recognize the idea of certainty is linked to our pathologos. How can you be open and receptive to higher insights and understanding or states of mind of enlightenment if you think you know it all already? That's the Dunning-Kruger effect. The more ignorant and suffering somebody is, the more certain they are about what they claim to be knowledge, the more prejudiced they are, or the pathologos attached they are. So we want to be in this numbed state of mind. So when your friend that you're having coffee with, right? Coffee, and you're practicing the dialectic with, you or they are doing very, very well, and you're brought to a stunned openness and you feel like you're completely stung and out at sea. You can compliment them by saying, "You are, my friend, a Blatianaki." Blatianaki. a plate of naki, which sounds like a delicious Japanese dish. I will have a platia naki, please. A plate of naki. Naki. Now, that means a flat stingray. Okay. That was a fun little excursion. Worth doing because it's a funny insult, and it's one directed at Socrates. So, a flat stingray of the sea. Oh, let's see if this one means of the sea. Let's just finish this off. So put it in our Unicode translator. Get the Greek. Get the lady to tell us how it sounds. Thalatia. Thalatia. Thalatia means of or in or from the sea. So yeah, literal translation from the Balboa, which is why we love the Balboa translation. So, in your appearance, ad hominem, and every other way, you seem to be so much like the flat stingray of the sea. Literally is what he's calling him. Platianaki. Oh, how do you say that last part? You might as well have a fancy way of saying it. Platianaki Thalatia. You're a Platianaki Thalatia. Thalatia, how do we remember that? Thalatia. Platianaki, a plate of naki, and Thalatia? Thalatia. I don't know. Thalatia. Doesn't sound like anything I already know. Thalatia. I don't know. Call your friend a Platianaki Thalatia, a flat-headed stingray of the sea. For self also always makes anyone numb who comes near it and touches it. That's what a stingray does. For you now also appear to have benumbed me in such a way. He is benumbed. A reason to call him a oh my goodness. Platianaki Thalatia. Platianaki Thalatia. For truly, both my soul and my mouth are numb. Wow. He's not only silenced from his... He started very confident. He assumed he knew what virtue is. He didn't even ask Socrates what virtue was, or let's define virtue. He jumps right into whether or not it can be taught. Not only is his mouth numb, his soul is numb. What kind of understanding does Meno have of his soul? Probably not a lot. Because he's in the world of appearances, physical senses, the world of becoming. But I don't know. So let's see if he's all bluster. And I do not know in what way to answer you. I do not know. Ooh. The thing that he was making fun of Socrates for at the beginning, at page 15, he's saying, I don't know. He's making fun of Socrates for not knowing. So maybe it's a negative thing for him. I don't know. Indeed, though I have indeed spoken countless times, right? And made very many speeches in front of many, right? How many such grifters are in the world right now? People who claim to be knowers. I have spoken many times. I have many podcasts. I have many right-wing media networks. I have many Patreons. And many and very good speeches about virtue. According to, well, it's funny, right? He doesn't know what virtue is. He can't even define it. He doesn't even know how to define anything. And he doesn't even know about the realm of being. And virtue apparently is the whole of being. Let alone the level of being and thinking, ontology and epistemology, beyond being, needed to grasp being as a whole. If he doesn't know any of that, why is he saying he makes good speeches about virtue? That's funny. Also, it might give us an insight as to whether or not he's telling the truth here, or if he's blustering. Even though I've spoken countless times and made very many speeches in front of many, and they were really good speeches about virtue, by the way, as they indeed appear to myself, even if I do say so myself, that's funny, as they appear to myself. What a comedian. But now I cannot in any way say what it is, even though I was very smart before. I don't know. I can't say in any way what it is. I cannot in any way at all say what it is. That thing that I did all these good speeches about, I don't know what it is. And you appear to me to be well advised not to travel abroad, nor away from your hometown. For if you did such things as a stranger in another city, you will be quickly driven away as a sorcerer. What's that called? Intimidation. If you are following along with, or reading along with us, with the other series running concurrently with this, Philosophical Midwifery, to do a day of this and a day of that, you will recognize the skillful and selective use of intimidations, punishments, exile, threats, coercion. All of these sorts of things are used to get people to give up on the logos, self-logos, give up on their self-goals, give up on their self-understanding, give up on their self-experience and knowledge, to go along with this bullcrap, my own personal beliefs. That's where our pathologos comes from, and that's literally what grifters do, because they can't use the logos to make their points. They use praise and intimidation, punishments and rewards to manipulate people to be on the team. Right now, at the time of recording, there's Trump versus Kamala in the American election. That's the entire marketing platform of the Republican Party. Be one of our team. We'll be nice to you, but we'll be mean to the other team, right? We will round up the people who are left, who don't agree with our racist beliefs and our sexist beliefs, which are all just distractions from the fact that the rich are going to steal your money and destroy the planet to make a little bit of extra profit in the meantime before humanity goes extinct. But anyone who doesn't allow us to be fascist tyrants, we will kill them because they're the other team. But to you, we'll be nice to you, maybe, not really, but maybe. And we'll allow you to kick some brown people, right? That's the whole appeal. To go along with a belief. Now, I don't know, it's a little bit sad that it's so obvious, but nothing's been done about it. Maybe you will be in a position where you can do something about it, because it's literally immature and irrational. You wouldn't allow it in any other profession. Imagine a doctor or an architect talking in this way. Anyway, so we can recognize what Meno is doing, in part because we're learning the pathologos in midwifery. He's threatening him. Advice. What does a knower do? Give advice. Advice is bullshit. Who cares about dumb advice? That's just a reflection of your opinion. Now, understanding dialectic so I can understand it for myself, that's different. Meno is giving Socrates advice. Can you see how ridiculous that is? Meno, who doesn't know anything. He's just a rich kid from a rich family who's all full of bluster. Like all of those right-wingers on TV, all those journalists from, not just America, Australia and England and all these other places as well. The rich, wealthy, privileged people who don't know anything, claiming to know. He's exactly the same. Like, let's say. He's giving Socrates advice. That's why you run from advice. Can I give you advice? Heck no. By the way, you can reflect with me together following the logos in understanding and dialectic, but I don't want your dumb opinions. Let me give you my opinion. Don't travel abroad. Not travel abroad. Let's go. Nor away from your hometown. You will be quickly driven away as a sorcerer. It's a threat. You're lucky you're in Athens, Socrates. Oops. Let's see the other translation. We are at ATB. Socrates, I used to be told before I began to meet you that yours was just a case of being in doubt yourself and making others doubt also. So the word is puzzled that we were reading and doubt here. So this is neat. The actual word is aporios. Aporia. That's our magic key term that we need to use because it's a special word that can refer to not just being at a loss of gold and silver, but at a loss of within your soul, being able to talk. So aporia means puzzled and also means it's also self-virtue if you are puzzled because you're following the virtue and dialectic and logos. So puzzled or doubt. Aporia. You are always being in doubt yourself, aporia, and making others aporia also. And so I find you are merely bewitching me with your spells and incarnations. Interesting. What are we seeing? It's a benefit that he's also defined as self-justice, self-virtue, that Meno should be appreciating. It's a benefit from spells and incarnations, tricky devil magic stuff, Harry Potter. No. The logos, the very paradigm he is saying, Meno, learn, I'm doing it over and over again, and use yourself. He's giving him opportunities to use the paradigm of the logos. For Meno, he doesn't understand the logos. It seems like magic. Right? Now imagine if all of the conclusions we have come to by studying the logos and the pathologos that make sense of the conflicts in our world, the broken political system, the broken all the spiritual systems all in discord with each other. How easy it is for us to see the simple nature of their essence and why they're in conflict, the logos and pathologos, and we'd be able to talk about it to people. If they didn't understand what the heck we were doing, they might call us a special wizard. Or you are channeling a spirit that allows you to be able to talk about blah, blah, blah. It seems magic to someone who doesn't understand. Imagine showing a cell phone to somebody 500 years in the past. They would think it's magic. That's a trope of some animes have that. Look at my cell phone. It's a magic device. To Meno, it's not understandable. It's not the logos, even though Socrates is telling him to learn it. So he says, oh, it's magic what you're doing. It's just magic. You're bewitching me with your spells and incantations, not the dialectic and logos, which have reduced me to utter perplexity. And let's see if the word's perplexity, aporia again. So it's aporia, aporia, aporia. And if I am, so you don't have to believe me. Completely enchanted me and become full of aporias. Aporius. No need to believe me if you can see it for yourself. And if I am indeed to have my jest, it's just a joke, by the way. I consider that both in your appearance and in other respects, you are extremely like a flat torpedo stingray seafish. For it benumbs anyone who approaches and touches it. And something of the sort is what I find you have done to me now. For in truth, I feel my soul and my tongue quite benumbed. And the word seems to be numb. It will take numb. It's in both translations. And I am at a loss as to... At a loss. I don't see aporia in that sentence. I'm at a loss as to... Don't know. It's either not knowing or at a loss. I don't know, or at a loss at what answer to give you. And yet on countless occasions, I have made abundant speeches on virtue to various people, and very good speeches they were. So I thought, right? What did he really say? So it appears to myself. Appearance. Not thinking. Appearance. Not thinking. Garbage translation. But, we can still use it for fun. But now I cannot say one word as to what it is. You are very well advised, I consider, in not voyaging or taking a trip away from home. For if you went on like this as a stranger in another city, you will be very likely be taken up for a wizard.
You're a wizard, Harry. You're a wizard, Harry. You're a wizard, Harry.
You're a wizard, Harry. You are a wizard, Platinaki. Oop. What does Socrates say to that? You are a villain, O Meno. What? And you almost deceived me. Why exactly, Socrates? I recognize for the sake of which you made a comparison about me. Why then do you think I said that? In order that I might make a comparison about you in turn. For I know this about all those that are beautiful. Wow, he just called him a flathead stingray, and he said, oh, by the way, you're doing bloody magic, and if you leave home, they'll get you because they'll call you a sorcerer or a wizard.
You're a wizard, Harry.
And he turned around and say, oh, you're so beautiful. Is this part of the art? Is this part of the bedside manner? If we can recognize how it functions as an ad hominem attack because somebody is unfamiliar with the logos and pathologos, they're just over here, then we don't have to take it personally. It isn't personal. It's just what every human being will do if they're unfamiliar with if by being a human being, we will all hit a block to the logos and want to do that crap, whether we like it or not. And if you don't know what virtue is, you won't know how to not act like that and do something better. And Meno has just said, I don't know what virtue is. So yeah, he doesn't know how to follow the logos. He's hit a block. His reaction to the block is just be a spoiled little brat. Ad hominem, attacking. He's not familiar with this because he doesn't know what virtue is. How can he know how to do this? So what? You're going to take it personal that he's ignorant? Socrates doesn't. How much more likely is Socrates going to keep the conversation alive if he reacts by saying how beautiful he is as a way of diffusing the situation, then start taking it personally? I'm not a flathead, you're a flathead. I'm not a stingray sorcerer who needs to be killed if he goes out of the city, you are. So, I know why you're making that comparison. Meno might not. Because hey, our blocks, we don't have blocks, our blocks have us. We don't have a pathologos, the pathologos has us. That's why it isn't a blame game. It's just a virtue game. Having the virtue to follow the logos. and master the path of logos too. That's it. So, I know why you're doing it. Why? Because I know this about those who are beautiful. They rejoice in these comparisons, for they are to their advantage. For I also believe that comparisons or similes or likenesses of the beautiful are beautiful. Thus, I will not make one of thee. But as far as I am concerned, if the stingray is self-numbing, so he's saying, hey, you're making a comparison about me, so I turn around and make a comparison about you, because beautiful people like that, because I'm going to say something about how beautiful you are. And by the way, I think that even those comparisons of the beautiful are themselves beautiful, so I won't do it. Instead, if the stingray is self-benumbing, not just benumbing you, but me also, and thus it makes, and it's in that way that it makes others numb, then I am like self. But if not, then I am not. This is something that Socrates said before. I'm not interested, as everybody else is, either at the level of beliefs and opinions, professional opinion havers, grifters, blusterers, no one who's not doing the logos, anyone who's not doing the logos doesn't have knowledge. You can't. So what do? Have bluster, appearance. So what's their goal? To convince others of their own dumb beliefs. Socrates says, I'm not doing that. I don't care if people believe me. I want myself to believe me because it's true. This is all about myself. Look how greedy I am for the logos. It's for my benefit. Now, secondarily, it will naturally be beautiful and be convincing to others anyway because it's naturally beautiful, but that's secondary. That was the Phaedo. This is the second time he's saying this in our series so far. If the stingray is self-benumbing, and it's in that way because of the self being put in this aporia, which we've also already said is can be virtue, and thus makes others numb. So in that way, it makes others numb. Then I am like self. Now, like it. So here is a clue that we can only get by reading the text. This text. If the stingray makes others numb because it makes itself numb first, then I am like it. The lower reading of self. Now let's take the middle reading. So the levels of reading we can also recognize in here. The word altos or self refers to all three of these levels. So then I am like it, the stingray. Then I am like self, the honorific in being. Then I am like the ideal of virtue. But I am like self. Maybe then he's giving us a clue. If our goal is also to reach the self, then maybe the self is also completely stung. Like a stingray who stings himself. Like a poria, which we've also said is virtue. And maybe the self is itself a self-numb stingray. It's also in aporia. Puzzled. So there's a clue there only for us who are reading in this way. Balloons. Let me make sure I'm recording my sound effects. Yeah. Looks like it. So, self numb itself, and that way it makes others numb. So it's interesting. It's the whole principle, reach the good yourself, and then you'll naturally bring people to the good. Or let your light shine, and you'll be a beacon for others. For if I do not make others puzzled, here we go. It's telling us something. I do not make the others puzzled from my self-abundance. That's a big one. but by being all the more self-puzzled. So I make others puzzled not because I am filled full of gold or insight or knowingness. He said that at the beginning, I don't have knowing. But because I am even more puzzled than them. And in this way, I make others puzzled. And now, concerning virtue or excellence, what it is, I, on the one hand, do not know. There he goes again. I do not know. Then, of course, perhaps you did know before until you touched me. So maybe you were very, very wise in knowing, well, until you touched me. However, now you resemble one who does not know. Resemble. Is he really in this state of aporia, or is he using these ad hominem attacks and distractions because he is stuck? He wants to keep this false belief he's attached to. Don't know yet, but it's a question. Is he legit or is he a scammer? You resemble one who doesn't know. Is it true? Now, Socrates is not like Meno. Well, in the same way we need the accurate translation to see the words, to see the problem, he keeps using the word resemble, right? Like the doctor. Oh, I say, how's this guy going this week? And my patient says, I drank 50 beers and I drank 50 vodkas. Maybe he's got a problem with alcoholism. Meno keeps using the word appearance. Maybe he has a problem with being at the realm of appearance. So too, if Socrates is dropping the word resemble, maybe it's for a reason. Maybe he's saying it specifically because you aren't in it. He's not saying you also do not know. You also are in this aporia. I am successful in stinging you. And cheer.
Wow. He didn't know what solipsism was. He didn't know what deontological moral philosophy was. He didn't know what utilitarianism meant.
You really do not know, but he's saying you resemble. We'll take that as a puzzle and hold on to that question as we roll. But nevertheless, I am willing to consider and search along with you for what in the world it is. All right. That's a very interesting section. He said, Meno, have another go at using the paradigm. Keep in mind that we have already agreed you have to define your terms if you're going to use them. You can't just say virtue is using virtue or virtue is using a part of virtue. Define it first. Talk about the whole of it. Don't talk about its parts. Don't talk about justice and courage and stuff and holiness. These are all aspects of virtue. Talk about the thing as a whole. Use the paradigm, the dialectic. Define your terms, which is the first category of the dialectic. And Meno's reaction was, shut up. Shut up, you flathead, blockhead, stingray, sorcerer, witch, wizard. I hope you leave the city and I'm going to get you and they're going to hang you because you're a nasty witch. You nasty man. You're a bad man. You're a nasty man. You're a sorcerer. Your magic is all the devil. You're the devil. That's what he said, kind of. He's at his block. He said, hey, look, I've given you all this. Use the logos. I've been in many of these conversations. We've talked about the significance of the logos. We've talked about the significance of holding on to the logos as being courage. Even if we're not knowing, that's okay. It's not about pretending to be a knower. Aporia is still part of virtue. It's about being open and curious and puzzled. We talked about the significance of following the principles of the logos, the paradigm of the dialectic. We talked about defining your terms. So let's go back and try it again. Keep the conversation alive using what we've learned so far. And the reaction from those people have been, at times, shut up. You are a blockhead. You are a flathead in appearance and in functioning. So who cares about my appearance? You stink. Your eyes are too close together and I don't like your tone and you're being patronizing and your accent stinks and you remind me of that guy that I didn't like in high school. I wish you'd shut up. I don't like your voice. Someone has yelled at me from the philosophy groups that I've been in. All natural reactions of our pathologos telling us where our block is. So who's the real blockhead?
Wow.
it's worth a dab. Ugh. I did that ironically, but even though it was a dumb ironic thing, it still made me cringe. So, very normal. So what does Socrates do? Didn't say, hey, you're the one who's a blockhead, and I don't think you're really puzzled because you're just giving the appearance of it. He said, okay, I know that you're really beautiful and you'd like me to go on ad hominem attacks. Well, you'd like me to make comparisons about what you look like you're doing, but let's not get into that because you're so beautiful. Meno's probably blushing. Oh, you think I'm pretty? Okay, I'll keep talking to keep the conversation alive, to see if he can stay on track. He's only 15 pages in. That could have been the end of it. He's already given a bunch of definitions of virtue to demonstrate the paradigm, the dialectic, showed the significance of defining the terms by using an even simpler dialectic about shape and geometry, one that's even more familiar with Meno. So he's really going out of the way to explain it in a way that's easy for him to see. This is the geometry one. Let's define what a boundary is for a shape. That's just, if you've ever seen Euclid's geometry, it's literally one of the definitions you get at the beginning. You get a bunch of definitions, you get a bunch of like axioms and a bunch of postulates. I think 23 definitions. What is a line? What is a point? What is a boundary? And then 5 things you can do and 5 principles. And from that, you can generate all of geometry. It's pretty neat. So Meno's going to be familiar with that. So he just makes it easy, uses language he can understand, uses references he can understand to show him these principles of the logos, the principles of defining your terms before you use them, following the paradigm of the logos. And his reaction, and he's given him a couple of examples. So given a couple of opportunities. His first one was, oh yeah, I know, it's harming your enemies and being nice to your friends, and women are less than men, and slaves are less, and old people suck, and young people are stupid. Very common. Virtue isn't universal. There's a different virtue for men than there is for women. Nonsense, sexist crap. Very common though. Even today. Helped him realize that's not true. Gave him the paradigm. What did Meno say? Well, I'm not going to use the paradigm. I'm just going to quote a poet that I like. To seek beautiful things and be able to get them. Showed him that wasn't really good either, and that he couldn't actually come to a definition because everyone seeks the good. So just being able to get them, but if you're able to get them in an unjust way, is that virtue? So literally his definition is doing whatever you think is good, so doing anything, because even people who do bad things are just because they're at the level of belief and they've been grifted, they've been conned, led to believe that the bad is good. So even if you're conned, didn't talk about how do you know the truth. It says, hey, whatever you seek, do it virtuously. Do it with justice. That doesn't make sense. How do you define virtue? Doing anything with a part of virtue. All right, doesn't go anywhere. Let's start again. What is his reaction? Block, ad hominem, personal attacks, threats, talking about his appearance. Now, we are all Meno and Socrates. Just because you have a block doesn't mean you can't do philosophy. Otherwise, no one would do philosophy. Socrates had blocks too, I bet. Because everyone does if they're human beings. Pierre Grimes. People who've been studying philosophy for many, many years. We are all Menos and Socrateses. We want to be Socrates-like. And when we are functioning as a Meno, don't take the blame. That's not a lack of character. Being at a loss is still virtue. It's if you're okay with being at a loss. So when you start doing those ad hominem personal attacks or tangents or gish galloping, attacking the person instead of the logos or appearances, add that, or appearances, how you look, your sense of fashion is silly. You're a blockhead. Appearances. I don't know how to spell that. appearances. Yep. I was right. When you are like that, recognize it. Say, oh, I'm being a Meno right now. Let's swap over and be a Socrates. And take notes of when I started acting like a Meno. What was my state of mind? What was the words that came up? Promise to take this into my reading of philosophical midwifery to free myself from the cause of doing that. We have 2 enlightenment goals: the freedom from our blocks, the clarity and freedom is a level of enlightenment, and the actual apprehension of the truth in philosophy, midwifery and philosophy, pathologos and logos, both sides of the dialectic. One goal, dialectic, that's it. And you're in it anyway. If you're not doing this, you are a slave to your pathologos tyranny. Which is why it's obvious that our institutions and laws should be based around this, because it's a universal principle of human behavior and nature and purpose that we ourselves can understand by following the logos and having the courage to go this way when we have a block and not that way. No need for all of this division or exploitation, or as it manifests in our world, genocide and war and destruction of the planet. All this is just simply, all human problems are simply going that direction and that direction. That's it. What are human problems? Going that when they reach their block and not doing that when they reach the block. That's it. Now we can take this with us as a question as we read to see how it ties in with the text. That's what we need to do. When are we being like Meno? And when can we, how artfully like Socrates, can we make that transition into here so we can return back to the logos? So Meno's saying, you look stupid and I hate you and you're a jerk. And Socrates said, oh, that's a very beautiful person thing to say. Oh, really? Oh, okay. Now that I've flattered you, I've said I'm not interested in appearances. So even this compliment about appearances I just said doesn't mean anything to me. But to Meno, it means something to him. So it's okay, you can say that. He said, hey, look, I'm not interested in appearances. So taking it back to the logos. So we can wonder, is that a part of virtue? Write that down. Is the artful and, let's say, charming way Socrates can return Meno to following the logos part of virtue? That's a question we can have. I mean, especially since as we can recognize that this thing that happened with Socrates and Meno happens all the damn time. More often than not. I've been in the philosophy game for like 20 years with people who've been familiar with both the logos and pathologos for like 60 years or more. Happens all the time. Now, again, don't use this as itself a block. So you can say, hey, an ad hominem attack. I'm going to block the logos because I know this word pathologos. So I'm not going to call you ugly or stupid or fat, flat-headed. I'm going to say you're in a pathologos. They do that. Trust me, they do that. Equally so, hey, if we are doing our best to learn the artful and charming way of returning people to the logos, especially when they hit their block, I've heard people say, well, I've read this in the Meno, so I'm going to be a nasty bitch to you, and if you can't use Socrates' magical charm to turn me around, no matter how hard I want to be a bad faith actor and just be terrible to you, then it's your fault because you need to have the charm of Socrates. Bollocks. That's just another ad hominem attack that you are using to block the logos. In other words, so as you go forward in the logos, you'll learn new terms like the logos, like the pathologos, like this idea of charm, which means your pathologos will use it to block the logos. It has to, because the pathologos is a stronger force, as we are learning in the Orange Book, than our desire to follow the logos. Our urge to imitate our pathologos is more primitive and fundamental to our human species than our desire to master the logos. Meaning, the better you get at knowing the logos, the more your pathologos will use that. I got this. I remember meeting some philosophers, traveling across the world to meet them, and some of them didn't like the idea of someone who looks like me with my appearance doing the logos, and they would be very, very nasty. And when they were called out on it, said, well, he needs to have the art of Socrates, the charm of Socrates, that he should be able to make me do things even though I'm willingly being a so-and-so to him. Bollocks, that's literally a block. No one can make you choose virtue. That's your courage. That's your excellence. That's your justice, wisdom, courage, temperance, holiness. That's your virtue. But if we are with good faith actors who are not purposely trying to distract from the logos and instead are doing their best, then we can have a question. How is Socrates knowing what buttons to push to artfully bring Meno back to the conversation when he is in his unjust, unvirtuous, pretending maybe to be stung, to be in aporia, while just personally ad hominem attacking Socrates? So, a warning and a question. A warning: don't use your mastery of the logos to buy into the bullcrap of your own pathologos. Recognize when you are making the Meno turn. And make a Socrates correction. Correct yourself. It's not about being perfect. It's about correcting yourself and getting back on track. Okay. And we also know that, hey, by the way, if this is in other words, those people that I describe who pretend to be following the logos, but actually are just using it as an excuse to defend their pathologos, like I just gave the examples of. What's one feature of all of them? I call them being a nasty bitch, but really it's certainty. Certainty. I know I can be a horrible so-and-so because he has to be like Socrates and charming, blah, 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 blah. Seen it said to many people. Many people. It's very, very common. Now, if that's the case, what do they lack? Open puzzlement, certainty. So we can wonder, how does certainty, which again is tied to our pathologos, our ignorance and closed-mindedness, certainty, versus aporia, puzzlement, relate to A, the Meno to Socrates self-correction. No one can do it to you. If you are deciding to be a bad faith actor, that's your choice. You can't blame anyone else. That's called being a cry bully. I learnt that term recently. One of the streamers that I recommend is a fantastic political streamer named Denims, and she is doing fantastic work documenting and reporting and communicating in a very charming, she has a lot of charm and artfulness in the way that she communicates important information about what's happening in the world. First of all, her information is rare, her courage is rare to be able to speak on it, and the charming way in which she presents it to everyday people is fantastic. Her name is Denims, and in speaking out against the genocide of Palestinians, there are a few people who are like Meno, tied to their family Jewish beliefs that they are using to silence or to justify a genocide. And whenever good people like Denims are telling the truth about it, they try to make ad hominem, false, bad faith, personal attacks to silence the logos. And at the time of recording, she is partway through a month-long ban on her streaming, which is terrible for her, of course, and her income, but also for everybody else who benefits from her channel. And she calls that cry bullying. Someone who bullies, like specifically the guy's name's Ethan someone, who's on the H2H podcast or something. Anyway, he is a very troubled person, very tied to his injustice and pathologos, and he's a big bully. But when the victims of his bullying speak out, he cries. I'm the victim of these people speaking back to me. No different than the Jewish people are saying, hey, while we're doing a genocide, these Palestinians can't use force to fight back. That makes them terrorists, and that will allow us to justify our attacks more against them. The bully is saying, hey, these people trying to fight back against our bullying, and they're victimizing me. She also gave it a name. That's the, I think she said it was, it's cry bullying, first of all, but also the myth of the perfect victim. I can kick you in the head, but the way you stop me has to be perfect. Otherwise, I can kick you in the head harder. This kind of disgusting injustice. So that's cry bullying. So if you are being like that, like those Ethan someone who is supporting a genocide and is trying to bully people who are telling the truth, good people who are telling the truth, like Denims, you can follow her on Twitch. If she goes back, I don't know what her deal is now, but she's fantastic. That is bollocks, because the only person who can make that correction is you. You can't be like Ethan and say, oh, I'm willfully going to turn off chat. I'm willfully going to purposely misinterpret any comments, any words. I'm going to purposely misrepresent good people like Denims. And if you can't change my mind, that's your fault. If you can't correct my ignorance, that's your fault. You have to be the perfect victim. Now, what are we saying? That's a self-correction. When you find yourself acting like that way, of course, again, we're using the social reflection of this in this particular drama that our friend Denims is facing, but also globally, same thing. What's the Israel and the Americans and the Westerners who are supporting that saying? This cry bullying. We get to be terribly unjust, and you have to defend yourself perfectly. Bollocks. If you can't, you have to correct us, but we are bad faith actors. The same thing that all of the right wingers do, like that meme. Here is my terrible racist belief. prove me wrong. They're never going to be proved wrong. And at the time of recording, there's a new genre of YouTube content, where one of those bigoted, bad faith people are sitting in a room and all these people run to the middle to debate him for a minute or whatever. It's garbage. It's complete garbage, because it's not our job to help you change your mind, racist, fascist. All of you right-wing grifters, and Ethan included. You have to do a self-correction. You have to love the Logos more than anything. You have to do this, define it and demonstrate it. You have to try and keep the conversation alive. You have to do your best to make that Meno to Socrates self-correction. When you start going down this Meno turn, how do you correct? We added some things from philosophical midwifery, but the correction Socrates is making is doing his best to artfully and charmingly draw us back to the Logos. Let's get back on topic. I'm not going to go down the road of appearances. Not because you're a jerk because you're in a block, which is true, because you're so beautiful, because you'd win. There's a charm to that. We're dealing with people with problems. Now, so for us personally, our self-correction, let's put this in, highlight this in yellow. Our question is, this charm and artfulness we have to do with ourselves, because we're all Menos and Socrateses. We need to be, otherwise it would be an unjust world. We wouldn't have the justice of a problem and block to give us what we need to learn the dialectic to remove it through midwifery. And if we weren't also able to transition into a Socrates, how would we learn what we need to learn to overcome our blocks? It'd be impossible. In other words, we're always both. And of course, there is a third element where we can go beyond even Socrates to the self. That's a question we're carrying. So if we are like that, how can we go do our own self-correction? No one could do it for you. If you're demanding it, that's part of your problem. All you can do is do your best to get back on track to the Logos. And people will cry bully. It's very easy to do. Bully and then cry victim. I want you to stop the Logos, but if you speak up, I will act like the victim. Oh, shut up. Hang on a second. You stop. Why should I stop? Oh, you're not stopping. You're victimizing me by not stopping the Logos. No, you're telling me to stop the Logos. Cry bully. Self-correction. So our question is, how does certainty and versus aporia, notice how certain they are when they cry bully. When Ethan got all these good streamers banned for telling the truth through bad faith arguments. So there's our question. How do we play with what we are learning, aporia versus certainty, in how we do our self-correction? Because we're all going to have our moments of Meno. We'll have our Meno moments. We have to make a Socrates switch. There we go. We have our Meno's moments. Let's write that down because it's kind of fun. Why? Let's get a different color. Why? We all have our own personal, in the flavor of our own flavor of Meno moments. Because we all have blocks to the Logos. It's part of being human. That's the path of Logos. And can and must make our own, running out of space here, and must make our own Socrates switch. So, notice our own, we have our own Meno moments. It's easy to see in others. That's why we use Ethan and the Palestine genocide, Israeli genocide right now. Because to see it easily, but it also applies to us. Like Socrates says, we make ourselves stung first. So our own Meno moments and our own Socrates switch. And so we're wondering, how do we play with certainty versus aporia for our own Meno to Socrates connection? And also, correction, sorry. And also B, how does it relate to how we can better and more artfully what would you call it? Bring the conversation back to the logos. Where possible. Again, where possible. If people are convinced they don't want to play, you can't make them. So, this is within ourselves and with others. And within our relationships, within the society, within the world, within humanity. And if we make contact with other, we talked about the Anunnaki already today, if we make contact with other species, the same thing. And Socrates has given us a clue, because he has said, hey, I am only like that flat-headed stingray if I'm stinging others secondarily. If I first sting myself, and it's through that, it's thus in that way that I make others stung, then I will take that analogy. So, A leads into B in that way. We have to play with this aporia, somehow get ourselves stung, especially when we're least stung, when we're most closed-minded, when we're most certainty, when we're most convinced that we suck or they suck or the logo sucks. We have to somehow sting ourselves. That's how we make our own Meno moments and our own Socrates switch. And then secondarily, once we are in the most more puzzled state, it seems to be Socrates is saying, that's the way in which I sting others. So how do we make other people make that switch? Or how do we help other people like Meno make that switch? Well, it's something to do with certainty versus aporia. But Socrates is saying, I sting others because I'm first stung myself. So this section B, how does Socrates demonstrate it? He first defines it himself. Or you could say, this is enough for a dialectic. So let's go. We can say, we have to, definition of aporia. We've called it puzzled. We called it numb. We called it in both soul and mouth. In both soul and mouth. We've called it at a loss. We called it filled full of perplexity. These are all just lifted from the text. Perplexity. Now you can add more of your own because this is for you to do. Now, after we've defined our terms, Socrates literally said, first define your terms, then use it. Socrates says use it. What do you say it? Be not from myself abundance, but being self-aporia. Self-aporia. Now he says not from abundance, so we can jump on to, because dialectic has side A and side B, what is and what is not. We've been talking about that a lot today. What is ultimately what is not true of the self, ultimately what is true of the self. This is where we're heading in the Meno. This is where we're heading in midwifery. He said, hey, what isn't true of demonstration is self-abundance. Not from self-abundance. And this is a fun way we can, so let's have a look at it in text. It's not from my self-abundance, so that's ADD. So let's pull out another term we can throw into our dialectic from the other text, ADD. Let's read this part. I might compare, so from this reading, what are we doing? We're pulling out the key terms that we can use for a dialectic, which is the game. I might compare you two in return. One thing I know about all handsome people is this: they delight in being compared to something. They do well over it, since fine features, I suppose, have fine similes. It's a nice way of saying that. But I am not for playing your game. As for me, if the torpedo is torpid itself. Oh, okay. So maybe torpedo is an old English word for stingray. If the stingray is stung itself while calling others to be stung, then I am like it. But if not, okay, let's look at what torpid means. I was wondering, why is it saying torpedo? Mentally or physically inactive or lethargic. Numb. Lost motion or power, numb. All right, okay, so torpedo is another word for stingray because torpedo is an old English word for numb, torpid. Where's it from? Torpidity. Middle English. From the Latin torpidus, meaning numbed or paralyzed. From the 15th century. Okay, yeah, it is. All right, so it's an old English word, which is why we have it in this translation. So, which is funny because a torpedo we use for like a weapon nowadays. Maybe they probably didn't have torpedoes from like submarines and stuff back in the 15th century. It's funny that I guess it does make you inactive because it blows you up. Quite a hefty sting that we use it for. Okay, so torpedo, stingray. If the torpedo is torpid itself first while causing others to be torpid, or if the stingray is stung itself, and that's what causes others to be stung, I am like it, but not otherwise. For it is not from any sureness in myself that I cause others to doubt. It is from being more doubt than anyone else. I cause doubt in others. So for my part, I have no idea what virtue is, while you, perhaps, you may have known before you came in touch with me, and now as good as ignorant of it also. Notice, he didn't say that in the actual text. He didn't say you're as good as ignorant also. He says you appear, you resemble. You're resembling someone. So if you met your friend at a Halloween party and you said, oh, you really resemble the Grim Reaper, you wouldn't say he is the Grim Reaper. Notice the significance of not being able to actually master this art without the Balboa translation. The stakes and the significance of what we're doing here. So hooray for you if you are watching. But nevertheless, I'll bring you back into the game. Let's inquire together. So suredness is a keyword we can add to our dialectic. Suredness. Suredness is what isn't. Suredness. So what isn't? Whoops, that's very thick. Let me just... Yeah, there we go. So as we do what is, we have to do what isn't. It's not the case that we demonstrate aporia by zoom in a bit, self-abundance, or assuredness, right? And that's cool because that sounds like the word certainty. Now that's not in the text. So I'll put it in inverted commas because we are pulling this ourselves, which is okay to do. Now, ideally, you want to be using the terms from the text, but we can, because we're also reading the midwifery book, we can throw this in inverted commas to connect it with midwifery. So that's our demonstration. Self-aporia first. So we had that over there. And again, I'm going to leave some work for you guys to do, like Socrates is for Meno. Now, after demonstration, division. Or, so we can say this is self itself. What is the definition of it itself? Let's use a different color. Oops. Demonstration is how does that define self? How does that aporia function self to others? The other here would be Socrates. How does it function? It makes you numb yourself first. And then division. Now that you are numb, how do you divide out to others? Make others puzzled. Make the others puzzled as a secondary effect from the first primary effect of aporia, making yourself puzzled. So from that, you have a conclusion, which has two parts. You have conclusion, which is other back to self. So we need to have this other here. So we have conclusion as other. So we have to unify these others, which is synthesis. So from that, so we need some more divisions. What else can you do while you're self-stung? When we have more divisions, we can do a synthesis to get this other. And then we have analysis, which is taking that synthesis and bringing it back to self, which is other back to self. That's the structure. And do it for the side two here. Equally so for this. Equally so for here and here and here. That's your work. You played your game. And that helps us to understand this. What role does... So we say, hey, is the artful and charming way Socrates can return Meno to the following the logos part of virtue? So how do we answer that question? The key definition, aporia. So certainty, which is what aporia isn't, that was over here. Certainty, what it isn't, you are not yourself certain, but you are yourself doing your own self-correction when somebody triggers you or whatever, or Meno's being a big fat jerk to you by calling you a flat-headed stingray. Can you somehow transition from certainty to aporia so you do your own self-correction, your Meno moment into a Socrates switch? That's demonstration. Now, our question was, how do we help others return to the Logos? We see that's division. By making that switch yourself, demonstration, self to other, aporia to other, your self-correction, then you can make others puzzled. So, aporia, first you got to learn what aporia is. And that's what we're doing in this text as we're going. So the significance of this is our question. What is aporia? So far we have these terms, but we can keep going. Then we have to, how do we make ourselves self-aporia? That's a question we're going to take with us. How do we do that? And Socrates says, hey, by the way, the only way I can bring you back to this conversation, if I can help you let go of your certainty, not stung, where you're calling me names, I'm certain. Let me give you advice, that certainty. Let me tell you, I'm certainly going to tell you what happens if you leave Athens. They'll kill you for being a witch. How do I bring you back from that negative state of mind into the Logos? I have to make you puzzled. How do I make you puzzled? By first making myself puzzled. How do I make myself puzzled? First, I have to come into a definition of what aporia is. That's our task. And by the way, if we can do that, that's the charming artfulness of bringing people back to the conversation that we were wondering about. How do we do that? By first defining aporia, then demonstrating it, then practicing it, dividing it, by stinging other people by first yourself being stung. Isn't that neat? We had a question about how cool Socrates was, because most conversations where they hit that block that Meno's hitting, when they jump into ad hominem personal attacks, that's the end of the conversation, no matter what you do. So we have a question, how do we be more like Socrates? Well, we use what we've been seeing to phrase it into two corrections, Meno moments to a Socrates switch, using this. And then we attempted to answer the question using the dialectic. That's the game, using the Logos, using the dialectic to answer our questions. And find questions, because there are a bunch of questions over here. What's this? What's this? What's this? What's some more things here? What's some more things there? How do we do this? A ton of questions has come from this use of dialectic, but also a kind of answer. How do we help others get back into the Logos? Doing it yourself. Making your own self-corrections from your Meno moments to your Socrates switch, which is somehow making the jump from certainty to aporia. How do we do that? I don't know. It's a big one though. We have actually got a bunch of possibilities here. Like, how do you make that switch? Recognize and acknowledge your block. So make sure you're talking to a friend, we could say. Add that in here. It helps if you're talking with friends. Helps. And friends are those who are also, a true friend has a third person in the relationship, the Logos. Otherwise, as you're not a friend, you're trying to make the other person to what you think is good. You think you're being loving, you think you're being helpful, but it's actually pathologos. So a true friend is also following the Logos. Helps when with a true friend who shares the same goal and desire. So let's say, instead of desire, love, goal and love of the Logos. Helps if you're with these people. So when you're certain or blocked, when you're having a Meno moment, helps when you're with a true friend and you're having coffee with them. Cheers. Recognize and acknowledge the block. Take notes of the states of mind and feeling, of the words and thoughts, and when the block surfaced. All these are clues. Promise to use it in midwifery when the time is appropriate, which could be then, and which is the dialectic on what is not true of the self. Get back to the Logos of the conversation. That's a possible set of principles that would reflect the Logos that you can try out and use. And refine with your friend. See what works, see what doesn't work. All of these are possible hypotheses for How do we make that first self-correction from certainty to aporia? How do we do that? There are a bunch of possibilities. I encourage you to find your own, work on it, because that's what it means to be a friend. It's not being certain these are the principles forever, but let's build it together. But let's definitely try it. Don't not play because you're not certain. Don't pretend there isn't a problem. Try it out, develop it. It's a relationship with your friend and a relationship with so you can say this means a true friend who shares the same goal and love of the Logos means you have a shared focus and relationship with the Logos. That's what it means. That's why we say you need 3 people in any relationship. One of them is the Logos. Here's a bunch of possibilities. Play with, work with, evolve with, learn with, develop with. Good friends who are like this. And if you want to find friends like this, feel free to subscribe to the YouTube channel for this podcast and on Twitch. You can also join our Discord to maybe meet like-minded people. You'll also get a notification when we go live, so you can add comments and questions in the live stream. But also we've seen the significance of developing this, because how else will we be able to follow the Logos if we cannot first self-correct our Meno moments to Socrates switches by somehow trying to find principles we can follow, especially when we're blocked, especially when it's hard to follow those principles, especially when we need the most virtue and courage and temperance and wisdom and justice to make this correction. When we are most stuck in our certainty, in our problem, in our block to the Logos, we need to make the self-correction. Only then can we have the secondary benefit of being able to help others as a result of yourself being stung. That's what Socrates just said to us. So now we have a question. How well is Socrates stung? How well can he make the switch? How well can Meno allow himself to be stung as a result? And how well do we get back to the Logos? And what other delicious, nutritious, nurturing, benefiting wisdom and Logos insights can we get from this conversation that's unfolding for us and with us? How well can Socrates stay stung? How well can it influence Meno? And how well can we benefit from the resulting return to the Logos? Lots of wonderful things to be wondering about and have as a cliffhanger. So I hope you are stung. I hope you are puzzled, numb, both in soul and mind, and at a loss and full of perplexity about that question. And I hope you bring it with you next time as we pick up our reading. Thank you so much for joining me. Bye.